Yeah, you know what? You are right.
You are right.
Hey everybody, Space Marine Steve from Play on Tabletop here on the deck of Hyperspace Hobbies with my good friend Ian. How's it going, my man?
It's good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. So today we are here at Hyperspace Hobbies talking about the Landraider. Oh yeah!
Love the Landraider right now.
I love the Landraider. I love it.
But first, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say about Landraiders, and we're always getting back to our community.
In particular, if you've got any fun stories about Landraiders, crazy stuff that happens in the game, cool ways to use them, just take a sec, put it down in the comment section. I want to hear it. It always gives me a good chuckle whenever Landraiders do something fun.
And sometimes those stories are a way to learn how to use a unit that in a way you never thought.
Because you can do some wild stuff with a Landraider, like absolutely wild.
Landraiders come in all shapes and sizes. What do you feel about the general point costs of them as a whole?
I think that some of them are fairly costed. Some of them are kind of too expensive. It's actually a really intense moving target, in my opinion, because sometimes when you're talking about a Landraider, something that's like incredibly tough, right? But also in some cases can have like incredible output, right? GW kind of has to walk this tightrope. Because if you make it too expensive, as in editions past, no one takes them. Right. However, if you make them like too cheap, then what happens is like everyone takes them and they're everywhere, and you start seeing lists that spam them. Right, and because they get spammed, then suddenly they become like agitating to play against. I really wish we could find a great sweet spot, and I don't know if we're quite at the sweet spot yet for points, but I think we're actually pretty close.
Yeah, and they come in all shapes and sizes. They do all different things. I think generally their point cost right now is good because I'm seeing them on the tabletop, but I'm not seeing them abused on the tabletop.
That is true, actually.
Only in like the cheesiest of the cheese will you see 3 of them.
Yeah, and even then, it's arguable how good that really is. They've got the Redeemer, the one with the flamethrowers.
Yep.
Godhammer, the one with the las cannons. Then the Crusader, the one with the hurricane bolters.
Yeah.
Tournament-wise, we're talking about the Redeemer. That's the one that mostly gets played.
Yeah, it's pretty much the only one that sees the light of day. Mostly because of its Overwatch capabilities. I think that's why. It's so strong with those 2 flamethrowers. They're D6 plus 3 for...
Each.
Yeah.
Each.
That's a lot.
Which is crazy.
It's super strong.
And that one is 260 points.
260, yeah. That's fair.
I feel like that one is fair. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that actually needs to go up because I think you'd see less of them played.
If it hit like 275... Even though it's like such a small amount, it doesn't look as good.
And it doesn't feel as good, right? Sometimes it's weird. Like sometimes a 10-point swing can mean everything. With the Redemptor Dreadnought, it went from 200 to 210, and you see an immediate drop-off in lists.
Super sharp drop-off.
Right? A super sharp drop-off in lists that are running them. Now it's only the lists that really go for all Dreadnoughts all the time, right?
Yeah, it was a reduction in spam.
Yeah.
But with some of those units, it's like if you're playing 2 of them, like you said this before, if you're playing 2 of them, you have 1 of them. If you're playing 3, then you
got 2.
Yeah, you might see what one of them does on a tabletop, which can be really frustrating. But not so much with the Landraider because you've got, pop smoke to keep it nice and safe.
Yeah.
You've got armor contempt across the board. Every detachment has that. So there's a lot of ways to keep a Landraider fairly safe.
Yeah.
And it's it's a really big model, so it's hard to put line of sight to your favor, but luckily it's tough enough with that 2-up save and toughness 12 to soak up some damage.
The Landraiders can kind of be used as like an offensive weapon. They can be used as troop carriers because they're all transports, right? But they can also just be used as like this really big, like tough unit to sit on an objective to create like an immense amount of board presence.
Yes,
right?
Board presence is what they command.
They command the board presence,
especially the Redeemer. The Redeemer is what we're going to be probably leaning towards for the most part because it's the one you see the most, and we both just agree it's the best. It's the best. Why? The Firestorm detachment.
100%. Yeah, it's very strong. Really, any of the detachments, but the Firestorm makes it very strong because you can now advance and shoot all its weapons.
Yeah.
Right? And then on top of that, there's a bunch of strats that support it too. So like if you shoot it, the guys out inside can like get out and shoot. Right. Or like the guys inside can like get out and shoot with a bonus with a different strat or whatever.
Or get back into it at a weird stage.
And then get out later. There's lots of like tricky stuff that you can do with the Firestorm detachment to get like even more mileage out of that Landraider. It's one of my favorites right now in a competitive sense. It just does so much for your table, like as a Space Marine player. And I'm really glad the Chaos don't have access to them.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Really glad.
They get it good enough with Dark Pact on a Landraider.
Well, they get it good enough.
Sustains and all the rest of that. Sustains and lethals on a Landraider.
And they're all rock solid. The nice thing about the Redeemer too is that it does have the grenades keyword, right?
Yes,
so you're able to like, we've talked about that before. So you can like roll up with it and then like pop grenades, flame a bunch,
and
right?
Then charge something and tank shock it.
Yeah, exactly. It's hilarious.
When you play a Landraider, do you kind of keep a couple command points just to yourself to make sure that it stays up? Like, do you keep one command point for pop smoke? Do you keep one command? I know whenever we've played, you've typically have one in the pocket just for Armor of Contempt, because that is like just so essential for getting through some games of Space Marines.
Because you never know.
Do you want to like try to load up on command points, knowing that keeping this thing alive is such a big part of your game?
Honestly, I kind of have to make that assessment game to game. However, there is not much in the game that can chew through a fully amped up Landraider. So like you could pop smoke and Armor of Contempt. And with both of those things stacked on top of each other, you're -1 to hit, you have cover, and all their attacks have -1 AP. And
it's a command point investment and a big part of your points.
It really is.
It's got to make the difference on the battletop.
It does. And to like Space Marines are particularly command point like thirsty to do the things they really want to do, with the exception of Oath of Moment, killing one thing a turn. You actually need your command points to do a lot of the fancy stuff, and sometimes not even the fancy stuff, just like Armor of Contempt to keep guys alive. So because you're always kind of going through this mill of command points, I find it hard sometimes to hold on to like, smoke on the Landraider or something else. But that is actually the nice thing about a Landraider, is that even without those things, I can kind of trust that it's going to live for a couple turns.
Yeah, you don't need to be so cagey and make sure that it stays alive in that particular way, because its durability and its toughness
is so high.
Going to make it through.
And the nice thing about it too is like you can use its size to an advantage. Just like the size of Bulbasaur here, it's huge. Yeah. And so all you need to do in the land of 10th edition is have like one of its sponsons out of line of sight behind a ruins, right? Behind a piece of terrain, or one, the nose of it kind of just poking out.
Yeah.
Right? And because that's the case, you're almost always getting cover. Do you know what I mean? Like you can kind of police how much is really done to the Landraider just by solid positioning.
Right.
Without having to spend CP.
The Redeemer, clearly our favorite. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the least played one, is the Crusader. Hurricane Bolters.
Ooh, yeah.
Something about this just doesn't sing as much. It does have the biggest carrying capacity at 16.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is interesting when you start thinking of like units that can be that big. They can fill up all the slots for the Landraider. You can get a lot of interesting combos in it that you can't get in the other ones. You could do like Ragnar and 15 Blood Claws, and then they're getting out, they're advancing, they're charging, which is an incredible jump.
Yeah, that's very strong.
And you only have to spend a single CP to buff 15 guys plus Ragnar, which is awesome. Which is hugely beneficial if you're worried about CP management and you need to make a good punch and a forward push.
Which is really good. All the Landraiders also have like, the assault transport thing, so they can move, the guys can get out, and then they can just assault, right? So you can even just get the guys like up there, that extra inch, because most Landraiders move like 10. Mm-hmm. And really, like, my thoughts on the Crusader is at 230, it feels like it's cheap enough, whilst it has the same durability as the other two. Yes, it has more transport capacity, which is great. But in Space Marine land, there's actually few times that's really going to matter, especially to avoid like all the eggs in one basket thing, right? Like I thought about it a lot. I'm like, you could put like 3 squads of like assault intercessors in it with a captain.
Yeah.
There's 16. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But then you like, cool.
Like
but
just riding around
like,
a
why?
700 point vehicle.
Yeah, like why? Right? Like it's a lot to put in one spot, especially, and just like even just congregation of units. You're talking about a 230 point Landraider and then 375 point units of dudes that really don't survive at all once they're out on their own.
Yeah.
Right? And then one miscellaneous like character you could make it cheap with like a lieutenant or something like that. Okay, sure. Is that really worth it?
No,
it's not really.
I don't think so.
Right, especially since the Landraider's also not doing a lot for you in terms of output because Hurricane Bolters, strength 4, AP nothing, 1 damage.
Yeah, and that goes it back to what detachment can you use to make this
Better.
the best. And I think Gladius Storm of Fire to actually put some AP
and ignores cover on them.
And ignores
that's
cover.
Great. Yeah,
that actually does make that
something
weapon sing.
Yeah, it does.
Just because the AP buff that it gets.
Yeah, you could also do some hilarious things and like combo it with like the Storm Speeder Hail Strike.
Yeah. Right,
to give it an extra AP. If you're playing Gladius, then you pop the CP into it, they become AP2.
Right. Honestly, any of those Storm Speeders, the bonus to wound versus vehicles and monsters one wouldn't be bad either. Cover. Because then you're shooting your Storm Bolters, but the re-rolling, it's 24 shots that are re-rolling 5s. You'll get a couple in there.
It'll be cool.
Not the most efficient.
No. And there's the thing is now what we just did is we talked about a 230 point unit that has mediocre output. And then we just talked about putting another 130 point unit right next to it just to make it good.
Yeah, at what point do you just give up?
Yeah, at what point do you just take the 260 point Landraider Redeemer and go, I guess this does what I need it to do?
Fair assessment.
Right.
And let's get to this last one, the Godhammer. Mm-hmm. This one I love. I've been playing it for editions. You've been playing it for editions.
Yeah.
It was the only one that existed.
Yeah, it was the only one.
And then
I
think they came out with metal Hurricane Bolters for Grey Knights.
No, and it wasn't for Grey Knights. It was for Black Templars.
Black Templars.
Because they had it was like a box set you got. It was like the Crusaders or something like that. And that's why it's called a Crusader.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that one actually works in quite a few of them. It works in Firestorm because it can advance and get into better positioning. But with the Iron Storm one, the Iron Hands detachment, you can do a whole bunch of tricky things. You can make it hit on sustained 5s with all of its weapons if it's shooting at a target that's below its starting strength. You can give it lethal hits with its shots, with a relic on a tech marine. There's lots of ways to make that one buffable with stuff that you're probably already going to be taking anyways. Like if you're doing Iron Storm and you're taking a tech marine, that relic is sort of a gimme.
Yeah.
I feel like anybody would take that. It's 40-point relic, but it's lethal hits on a 6-inch aura. So
it's really
that gets a little crazy once you start stacking a couple vehicles around it.
Yeah.
And then if you do that and have sustains on 5s, then it's lethals on 6s, sustains on 5s, 4 last cannon shots. Pretty awesome.
That's spicy.
Yeah, it actually hits extra hard.
It does hit extra hard.
But I think its carrying capacity is the least.
Yeah, you know what? You are right. It has 12. The Redeemer has 14, and then the Crusader's got 16. So they go slightly up, and it is the one that carries the least. You make the trade-off. It does have the most like firepower, right? Being able to because while the Redeemer is excellent at killing infantry, wounding elite infantry in particular, boy does it ever kill Space Marines, right? But the Redeemer, even when you strap a multi-melta to the front of it, the Redeemer is still kind of like lackluster against vehicles, larger targets, etc. Because whilst it has 2 of those bad boys, neither of them are twin-linked, right?
Yeah, the twin link does hurt it. Though them being strength 6, they wound most vehicles on 5s unless you're up against another Landraider.
Unless you're up against another Landraider. But T12 is the thing, right? T12 is the thing. So where the Godhammer will have a Hunter Killer Missile, of course, right? It's got its heavy bolters up front, but it'll have a multi-melta, and it's got 4 las cannons, and that is one where you get to put it at the back of the board and fire shots long range, right? So basically, if it can see you in the current table setups, if it can see you, it can shoot you. Yeah. It's never got range problems where there are points in the game where the Redeemer might get caught out, especially if you're not playing it in a Firestorm detachment.
Right.
It could get caught out with being like, oh, now I have to give up a turn of shooting this 260 point thing because I've got to just go, I move, I shoot the twin-linked assault cannon and a storm bolter, and I say go.
the Ironstorm detachment also has another relic that is pretty strong for this, which is a unit within 6 inches can just ignore 1 damage that is after a failed save, which is extra good if you're playing something that's like the focus. You know your opponent's going to want to shoot this for sure, and you just have that guy kind of lingering around. Yeah. Or you move it and he gets out like turn 1 and hides behind it and just goes
which
like,
is
please,
great.
please, please, please. And then as soon as it starts, he goes, I'll get some wounds back and give it
+1 to hit.
Give it a ballistic skill.
Which, in that case, the Godhammer one actually does, and I think maybe edge in front of the Redeemer, especially in the Ironstorm with one of those Tech Marines, because now you've got las cannons and multi-melt is hitting on 2s.
Las cannons, multi-melt is hitting on 2s. Usually the ranged stuff that your opponent's going to have is all going to be the high strength, single big damage.
Oh, yeah, and you can zero it out.
Yeah, instead of the Redeemer, who's more of a frontliner, where they might just get plinked to part by, plasma guns.
Yeah. So it really does go into how you want to play it. If you want to have a really aggressive Landraider, we would suggest a Firestorm detachment with a Redeemer.
Absolutely.
Get it up there, right? Like start grenading things, shooting things, overwatching stuff, charging into things. Because even if it charges into things, right? Tank shocks, sits in combat for a turn, messes with some of your opponent's movement, and then just shoots something else. Yeah. Like who cares? It doesn't matter what it does because it can just sit there in the middle of the table and be real annoying. And it can almost do that entirely unsupported.
Yeah, if you're going into a list that kind of thing is left unchecked,
it's bad.
If your opponent doesn't have the firepower to deal with it, to drop it in turn 1 and turn 2, or turn 2, turn 3, and you get a couple turns of a Landraider being mid-table, you're going to crush.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Firestorm detachment is a great detachment for that to be in, especially because the stuff you'll surround it with also probably hits with flamers or is going to be close quarters. It also, in the Firestorm detachment, when it's within the 12 inches, they go to strength 7, which is great. Oh, yeah. Right, which is hilarious. So Firestorm's a great place for the Redeemer to live. I would say that a Gladius is like a close second for a Redeemer to live.
Almost arguable. The only reason why the Redeemer edges out in Firestorm is because it actually has flamethrowers. Yeah. And if you're desperate enough to spend the 2 CP, you can use the flamethrowers. You can float
flamethrowers
crazy. In Gladius, you can advance
and shoot
which is good enough. Probably going to be where you need to be.
Yep.
And then Storm of Fire.
Yeah, it gives if you're in the Dev Doctrine, you can up the thing's AP for a round, bring it to AP3.
Which means the flamers are AP3.
Yeah, they already ignore cover, so there's a little bit of a about that. However, even without that, you get 1 turn of I get to advance, I get to shoot, and you can pay CP into it to kind of let it do that all the time anyways, which is great. And if you're playing Godhammer, then we think the Ironstorm's probably the choice. Yeah. Because you get to sit at the back with a Tech Marine, you get to be protected, you get to fire long range. The Ironstorm also has the inherent baked in rerolls,
which is awesome.
Which is great for something that's just shooting effectively 6 anti-tank weapons, right?
And it also has, if you drop below half, you can pay a command point, and that vehicle can shoot the target that's shot at it.
Godhammer Landraider paired with a Tech Marine is a great choice, and Ironstorm's a great place to put that. I would say that underneath that Gladius, I play a Godhammer Landraider in my Gladius detachment, and I love it. Yeah. Right? So I think Gladius is the second, just a great choice for that. There are, of course, you could make arguments for some of the other detachments, but I think that if you're wanting to play these units, I think these are the ones you want to shoot for.
Absolutely. Well, that's our opinion on the awesomeness of each type of Landraider and a couple of the cool detachments they can go into. I am Ian. This is Space Marine Steve. Thanks for watching from Hyperspace Hobbies.
Have a good night.